So we have this video from Saint Tontas which says wuwa's story quests have some issues. This came out a day ago, it's on 10k views, which is insane. And it seems like a lot of people do agree with this. I mean, it's got 700 likes, 31 dislikes, which again, pretty good. And yeah, Saint Tontas has been killing it recently. He's gotten a ton of really good videos and, you know, he's been pretty accurate with them as well. So I'm very interested in seeing what he has to say about wuwa's story quests and what issues they actually have, because usually whenever I make a negative video on Wuthering Waves, people dislike bomb it. I'll be real. Like, so many people like dislike it just because I'm saying, oh, sorry, Wuthering Waves did this wrong or something like that. And I'm not even like going nuclear on them, be like, this is the worst game in the world or something. I literally just say they've done something wrong and people don't like it. You know, that's just how it is. But it seems like he's actually managed to win over some of these people, or maybe the issues aren't even that bad. Let's see.
Version 1.3 and our bizarre adventure with Shorekeeper has been available for a little over a week now, and it's safe to say that this update brought a lot to the game. Amazing features like an entirely new map, a mountain of quality of life updates, and perhaps most important of all, a dazzling new resonator. While your enjoyment of the Black Shores is entirely subjective, with many adoring our newest sustainer's integration into the story, while others are lamenting over how many characters...
Yeah, there was a lot of, you know, people that didn't like the story. As I mentioned in the video, what video was it? I think it was the one about gacha gaming. Yeah, about people not liking the story. Yeah, there was some people in the community that didn't like it, and honestly, you know, there was this whole thing about, oh, you're not allowed to like it, or you're allowed to like it, or something like that. And it got so weird to the point as like, bro, who cares? Like, you either enjoyed the story or you didn't. It doesn't make you a Wuthering Waves hater if you didn't enjoy the Black Shore story, you know? And yeah, it was just kind of fun.
Characters glaze the MC, most players can agree that the Rover's experience and the revelations on their hidden past gave this tale a wild spin, setting up the player base for even more realizations down the road. What's clear for any player who saw this update was that this version was a massive lore dump. Tethys, the super advanced sentient AI responsible...
I think that was also partially why so many people got confused with the story, because of the like massive amount of lore dumping that went on. I think so many people had so much information that people were like, oh, this sucks, or oh, this is the best, and didn't actually take the time to look through it all. I know like some people did. Obviously I know I'd say there's quite a lot, but Cap looked through it and she actually went through the story twice, I think it was, and still confirmed, you know, she didn't like it, which again is fair enough. But I think a lot of other people, they did actually, you know, get kind of bombarded with information, so they didn't really know what the story was about, and maybe that kind of like skewed their perspective on it, which I definitely think was a big factor in it. And I definitely think that they should like maybe like expand it a little bit more, maybe expand the story, kind of like not lore dump all in one go, and kind of like, what do you call it? I don't know what the word would be, like overstimulate people with story, which I think isn't a very good thing to do, you know, whenever you're trying to tell a very detailed story like this.
Laments, Shorekeeper, a living amalgamation of Sonaro energy who was given purpose by the leader of the Black Shores, and Rover, the man or woman at the center of it all, without a single clue of how everything got like this, with memories of the past drip-fed throughout the quest. It's safe to say that we as players have more questions now than we did before, and unfortunately, there are many in the player base who weren't able to keep up. It could have been their...
Yeah, that's, I think that was a big thing, was that it was asking a lot of questions and not answering them. And I think that's why a lot of people were annoyed at the story, was because there wasn't that much new information, even though it sounded like there was, you know? We had all this Black Shore stuff, but they didn't actually show us what the Black Shores were doing, who they actually were really, apart from, you know, they're taking down the lament type thing. And I can understand where they're coming from, but I think that was something more that was like supposed to be answered in later versions, maybe in 1.4, or maybe in other versions, I don't know. But again, I definitely think that was something that they were trying to, you know, bring out into a longer story rather than answer it all in this quest, which I think is a pretty good bit of storytelling, but obviously some people don't like that.
Misunderstanding of vocabulary, a personal lack of attention span, or what I think is actually the biggest reason of all, their rushing of the story. And for those that rush the story, I can't blame them at all, because there are some genuinely massive flaws in the wuwa story design that we've seen present all the way since version 1.1. This critique isn't focused on the content, pacing, or structure, but rather the lack of quality of life when it comes to actually experiencing it. Today we'll be diving into why this is the case, exploring how the arbitrary restrictions in the story soured some of our past and current version updates, and how some simple new features, inspired by other gacha titles, can streamline this experience for current, new, and potential players.
So I feel like he's kind of getting at a point of like some of the bosses and stuff that get added to the game afterwards. He's showing off like Jue and that new, like, was it Fallacy of No Return, that kind of boss thing. I don't exactly know what he's getting at there, but I feel like there is some kind of issue with that. I think it is kind of boring just to have this kind of boss there afterwards, you know, after you finish the story. But again, I'm very interested to see, you know, what he can kind of bring, teach us, you know, what other things from other games could be added to this game. If you get what I mean. I'm
Burrows ironed out a lot of clunkiness with their quality of life updates, but there's even more opportunities here. As always, if you're enjoying this content, please hit that like and subscribe button. At the start of version 1.3, the harshest realization that every player pulling Shorekeeper had was the fact that, well, they had literally no way of leveling her past. You had no ability to access her ascension materials.
That was something that kind of sucked. Whenever I wanted to pull on Shorekeeper, I was like, okay, I've pulled her now, but how do I level her up? Oh, I've got to play the story. And I did want to wait to play the story on stream, but also I did kind of want to level my Shorekeeper up so I had a little bit of information about her. So I ended up just playing the story offline, which I think kind of sucks. I mean, I don't know if they're going to add some kind of temporary access thing. And I think this is where Saint Tontas is getting at here, is that, you know, there is no way for you to get to this boss without actually playing the story. Whereas, you know, in games like Honkai Star Rail, they actually have, you know, the temporary access where you can go and do it without actually having to play the story, and you can just get the parts and then play the story later, or something like that. Now, I don't know if that's the entire, like, basis of this video, and I've just spoiled it all. But again, I think that is some very important things that, you know, might need to be addressed in future versions of Wuthering Waves, because I definitely think it was very annoying not to be able to fight this thing, but also I could see on the other side of people, you know, not liking to be spoiled about some of the stuff that's upcoming. So I don't know how they get around that, but again, it's a little bit of a different game from Honkai Star Rail, so I don't see, you know, because with the Honkai Star Rail stuff, they actually have, like, materials, which doesn't really provide much of a spoiler of what's going to happen. Whereas this boss, I think, is going to have a little bit more of a, you know, it's going to tell you a little bit more about what happened in the story. But I guess if you don't care about that, then, you know, you just go do it. And if you cared about it, then you wouldn't, you know, fight this thing. But again, it is something very interesting to think about.
New boss, the Fallacy of No Return, who was also locked until the end of the 1.3 story quest. Yeah. This was absolutely devastating for a significant number of players for a few reasons. First, Shorekeeper was one of the most highly anticipated units from a simple team building perspective. Yeah. She is the third healer on the roster, the first limited sustain, and also the one with the biggest buffs in the game. Many wanted to get her up and running.
Soul, thank you for the sub. Welcome.
Running as soon as possible. And with her ascension materials and best in slot 4-cost Echo locked behind the story, this was impossible. The second reason was the release of a completely new endgame mode on the same patch. With 3 full sustain units required to fill out teams, many had
no, that's definitely a kind of deadly combo whenever it comes to, you know, adding a new character and then adding some new endgame stuff, which requires, you know, some of these new characters, but you have to play the story to actually, you know, get into this kind of stuff. But I think that, especially from a content creator perspective, some people do like to, you know, make guides and also kind of, you know, do the story at the same time. Now, obviously, I'm not one of those content creators. I don't really care about playing the story on stream or building a character and making build guides. But I think for a lot of people, you know, if you think of some of the bigger creators that are more maybe friendly to other stuff, they're kind of more, you know, focused on pulling the character, building them, and kind of making a build guide video, but then later on maybe going on stream and actually, you know, playing the story. But you can't do that because you have to play the story first and then make the build guide, which kind of sucks because, again, you don't have any kind of, like, metric for testing if you can't even, you know, get the echoes that you need, which, again, I think kind of sucks. And I definitely think that, you know, Saint Tontas is onto something here with, like, this kind of needs to be changed in some way, whether that is with temporary, you know, access or something like that. But again, it is something very interesting to talk about.
Chance of clearing this mode until Shorekeeper was fully built. While this was mainly an issue for the sweatiest players, those on the other end of the spectrum were affected as well. The third and likely most devastating reason was the fact that the hazard zone of the tower, you know, the one that gives a massive number of astrite, that zone had its reset less than 24 hours after the release of Shorekeeper. And there were many who were banking on her release to finally claim their astrite.
Okay, that's somewhat. I'm not sure if this was something that, you know, Gatchasmack was talking about. Was this the problem that he had with the overall tower adversity kind of, you know, linking up with the Shorekeeper banner? I can't remember, but that does kind of suck that it does reset so, like, soon after the Shorekeeper's banner comes out. I think, honestly, they should reset at the same time. I think that would, make so much more sense. And yeah, I don't know. It's a little bit weird that it's so close and so close to the banner, because it means, you have to speed run through the story and maybe even have to miss out on some of the story. I don't know. Depends how much time you have, I guess. But, sometimes you have to use that skip button to get through the story quicker so you can get the materials for the Shorekeeper so that you can do the Tower of Adversity, which makes things very quick and very, you just kind of rush it too much, which again, I think kind of sucks. But hopefully Kura Games do kind of catch on to this and see that, hey, there is an issue here and we need to change this, because again, it does suck that this kind of happens. And I think that a lot of people, I think it would just benefit the game even more if they do kind of stretch it out, not having such a short time period between it. I think, having it stretched out means that players are going to play it for longer. And hey, that means you got more players playing your game, which I think is better, rather than, getting them to rush it through all in like the first 24 hours of the release of the banner, which again, I think sucks. So yeah, hopefully they do like kind of change
some players had some immense pressure to level Shorekeeper as fast as possible. You could have simply wanted to play your own Shorekeeper throughout the story quest.
Yeah, that would have been cool too.
Or you were a player who was not consistently clearing the Hazard Tower, or just somebody who wanted the new healing echo on one of your other sustainers.
Oh yeah,
At the
true.
end of the day, there was likely a significant part of the player base who skipped through a majority of the story, not because they didn't enjoy it, but because it was preventing them from doing something else.
Yeah.
And in turn, diminished their overall experience. Even with the addition of the plot summary when using the skip feature, new in 1.3, there's a lot that players are missing. There is an incredible amount of care put into features like facial expressions, lighting, and environmental design that can't be put in.
I definitely think the story was a very good one, like graphically as well. So a lot of people would have missed out on all of this really cool stuff that St. Ondas is mentioning here. Obviously, there's some really cool graphics with cinematics, and also some cool little like kind of dynamic game mode stuff, which you just did like during the story, which a lot of players would miss out on by clicking that skip button. And it's not like every player wants to click that skip button. They want to get to the end so they can actually get this stuff, so that they complete stuff like the Tower of Adversity, which again, it sucks that players are almost being forced to do this. I never noticed any of the issues mentioned in the video. No, exactly. I never really kind of seen this either. And now this is probably because I'm more of a casual player of Wuthering Waves. I don't really care about finishing the Tower of Adversity quicker or missing out on rewards and stuff like that. I'm pretty okay with missing out on some stuff. Like, even though I make a lot of Wuthering Waves content, I don't play it, half as much as you probably think I do. I pretty much just play it on stream and maybe, do daily farming. That's about it. And I think a lot of people just haven't really recognized this because they are quite casual. I don't know how casual you are, But yeah, I definitely think that, a lot of casual players probably won't notice this, but it definitely will affect the hardcore community. Obviously, we've got a lot of people who do like to play this game kind of hardcore. Now, should they? That's a different question. You can play a game hardcore if you like or not. But I definitely think it does kind of affect them a lot more. And yeah, it's just kind of a thing of, do you want to enjoy the story and miss out on maybe, or potentially miss out on some rewards? Or did you want to just skip through the story and then, get these rewards and complete the highest level of the Tower of Adversity and stuff like that? So again, it is a big issue, and maybe a lot of people haven't really noticed.
That there were incentives for players to rush through this hard work as fast as possible. The worst part about all of this, however, is the fact that this is a problem we've had for months now, but the issues and pressure were never this big. We saw a similar situation with the release of Jinxie and her best in slot forecast echo, Jue. Jue was another boss who was unfortunately locked until...
I think that's a very good point there. I think you in chat, I think saying that you've never noticed any of this, I think it's because we haven't had much content like this. The only one we've had is Jue, and people maybe haven't noticed, but now we've got more bosses, more story where this is happening, where it's locked. People are starting to notice a little bit more, and I definitely think that is a very, very good point there, that, we've only really had one case of it in the past, and now, we're starting to see it with the second case of it, and, hopefully they do fix this on the third case of it, wherever kind of boss or whatever comes out, whether that's in version 1.4 or even in version 2.0, we don't really know. Hopefully they do fix it by then, because again, it will be a big issue for a lot of people wanting to just, get further in the game and do a lot of the stuff that is mentioned in this video.
Till the end of the version story in 1.1. While Jinxie didn't have any problems pre-farming her Ascension materials from the Morning Ikes, her massive synergy with Jue's effects made her feel incomplete without it equipped. And with her role as a DPS, this made proper gearing even more important for her performance, and in turn, gave a lot of incentives to blaze through 1.1 and mount Firmament as fast as possible to get started on the Echo grind.
I think that would have sucked us a lot more as well with Jinxie, just purely because they didn't have that summary thing. Whereas with the Black Shores one, it was a little bit better because, you know, people could just see the summary and just, you know, skim read through it and be like, okay, that's what happens in the story. Whereas with the Jinshi one, you literally have to skip it, not know what happened, and then, you know, kind of get to that, you know, Jue point. But I really don't think at the time that Jinshi came out, it was that big of a deal, just because, you know, there wasn't really that many characters out. No one really cared too much about being so hardcore about it. But I definitely think now we've got more characters coming out and more bosses coming out, it's becoming a bigger issue. I just said, but this is something that Genshin does better. They let you quick start weekly bosses if you haven't unlocked them, and no bosses aside the Inazuma one are locked behind quests. Praying Wuwa does something similar. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was saying with Honkai Star as well. You know, you don't actually have to glaze Genshin for this one. You can actually glaze Honkai Star too. They have the temporary access, which pretty much allows you to, you know, fight these bosses, fight this stuff to let you in early, which I definitely think will be a good thing to add to Wuthering Waves and to not lock a lot of these bosses and a lot of the stuff behind story, because again, it causes a lot of these issues.
Factor in that Jue was also a weekly boss whose materials were required for Jinxi's skills.
Yeah.
It's a very similar scenario to what we saw for Shorekeeper. While these issues were present for all players when the new update arrived, we also have to think about how all these restrictions could impact new and returning players in the future. With all of these bosses, materials, and echoes locked behind,
like, I couldn't even imagine how hard it would be for a new player who maybe, you know, didn't play some of the earlier stuff, like some of the, well, there wasn't really a Jeji stuff, but you get what I mean, like the 1.1 story, and then you had to get through all of that just to upgrade your Shorekeeper. Like, it's like all bad, you know, being caught up and having to play the story before getting to it, but imagine being behind on the story, pulling the Shorekeeper and being like, oh, I need to do the story to get some of the stuff. Like, that really sucks, and you know, I feel really bad for a lot of people that have to do that. But again, with the Black Shores as well, a lot of people have been coming back to the game because of the Black Shores. You know, they saw some of the other updates, maybe some people uninstalled, some people just stopped playing, and then they saw, oh, the Black Shores is pretty good, I'm coming back to the game, and they've like missed out on a couple of things, then yeah, it's going to suck for them, especially with the Black Shores version. Now, it probably won't be as bad in future versions because, again, a lot of people have had their faith like restored in the game almost for like, you know, the quality of the story and the quality of some of the gameplay. So it wouldn't be as big of a deal, but it definitely sucks for some of those people that have come back for this update, which again, even more proves why this is a big deal and why this sucks in Wuthering Waves.
Hours of story content. This could lead to many players skipping even more of the story earlier on. Not because they don't like it, but because this story is the only thing preventing them from strengthening their characters, a core element of RPG games. And that's not a great dynamic, especially when Kuro's made such huge leaps with their storytelling since version 1.0. The improved skip button is a quality of life buff, indeed, but it's a buff that only addresses a small part of the problem. In addition to the buff skip button, early access to new weekly or ascension would be a fantastic way to solve the problems we saw with Shorekeeper.
You can see here, this is what the temporary access thing looks like. I'm sure he's going to go into it a little bit more. But yeah, this is just an early thing. You can fight these things to get the materials that you want without actually having to, you know, go to a story and have it unlocked or something like that, which does suck for, you know, a lot of people that don't really want to play the story yet or, you know, can't get around to it.
While we'll never know the exact reasons for why a player skips, removing this barrier to leveling and gearing characters would remove one of its biggest incentives. There were many players who were playing the story just until they unlocked these bosses for farming, and when that didn't happen until the end of the quest, that was a major point of frustration for many. Removing that frustration can only improve a player's enjoyment of the game, and when we see these bosses in version trailers and live streams, it's not like much of the story is spoiled simply from the boss fights alone. Another feature that would...
I mean, I was saying earlier about it being like spoiling people with the boss. I kind of take that back a little bit. I don't think it spoils it too much. It obviously does give you a little bit of info, and if you're like a massive story freak, then maybe you're going to be like, oh, this is like ruining my immersion with the entire story. Obviously, that is a factor, but to me, you know, a casual player, as I said, I don't really care about seeing what a boss looks like early on. It would be cool to have the context, but again, if you're just trying to get through the story, and especially if you know, don't really care about the story and you're just trying to get to some of the essential materials or whatever you're trying to collect, then you're not going to really care about what the boss looks like or what context the boss is there for. You're saying the boss itself isn't a big spoiler, thankfully, though its name and design hint towards it. Yeah, I think so. But the thing is as well, as Saint Tontas put it, they're in trailers, they're in patch notes, they're in other stuff, so you're already kind of getting spoiled for it anyways, if you look at that kind of stuff. Now, obviously, again, there's some very extreme people out there who don't look at trailers at all, don't look at patch notes at all, because they think it's going to ruin their immersion. But again, that's a very, very small number of people. I think most people just don't really care about, you know, what the boss looks like, or, you know, what kind of implications it could have by, you know, being kind of spoiled by it.
Address those who regret their rush of 1.3 or even the 1.1 story would be the ability to re-experience key dialogues or cutscenes. It is undeniable that 1.3 had some of the most breathtaking visuals we've seen, not just in a gacha genre, but gaming as a whole. And it's an absolute shame you only get one chance to see them in-game. And it's an even bigger shame that you can take that one chance and skip it. But when
yeah, that does kind of suck, and especially whenever looking back at like some cutscenes, a lot of people will just go to YouTube where some guy's probably poorly kind of cropped it out. It's in 480p and it's got a massive watermark in the corner, which does kind of suck to look at. And again, I don't really like that kind of thing. I wish I could just play it back in my own game and get the full quality that the game wants it to be. So I definitely think adding a kind of like, you know, Coolback feature where you can go back to the story, go back to, you know, some of the cutscenes that happens, and just pretty much, you know, recall pretty much everything in the story. I think that would be good. As I mentioned at the start of the video, Kat went back through the story. I don't know how exactly she did that. I don't know if she actually made a new account or something like that. But again, some people might actually have to make a new account to go through the story. For the people that care about the lore, obviously there's a lot of people out there who are really into the lore, especially creators, who will go back through the lore on a different account because, again, they want a second read, they want to like confirm some stuff, which, you know, they can't do just on one account, which kind of sucks. And I definitely think adding a kind of reverse feature where you can go back, look at some stuff, look at some dialogue in detail would be very, very cool. Instead of relying on, you know, a lot of creators, I say creators, just re-uploaders of, you know, re-uploading this kind of stuff, which can tend to be, you know, lower quality.
And there are so many reasons to do just that. This new feature would be a fantastic gift to players to have them feel like they're not missing out. The gallery is nice, but these are just screenshots of those amazing moments. Those cutscenes are already in-game and taking up storage. Let's use them. Overall, there was a lot of potential enjoyment from the 1.3 story, but also some significant barriers for some players in experiencing that.
That is a very, I just thought about that. That's a very important point there. It doesn't actually take up much more storage to replay this kind of stuff. It's already there, and once you've played it, it's gone, you know? There's a lot of this kind of, you know, bloating of a lot of the files that, you know, stay on your computer that makes the game bigger. And a lot of this is just due to the story, which you're never going to play again on Wuthering Waves. So yeah, it would be nice to have a kind of reverse feature, because then you can make the most out of that storage and actually be able to go back to something that's just like laying dormant on your computer, which I definitely think, you know, is a good addition if they do add it.
That enjoyment. I was putting a lot of care here. Let's remove the incentives to skip it. As always, if you enjoyed this content, please hit that like and subscribe button.
Okay, well that was a good video. Again, Saint Tontas is making some really good videos recently. He had some very, very cool ideas there, especially for, you know, some changes that Kuro Games could make in the future. Hopefully we do see that, you know, happen in the future, and I'll definitely report on it if it does, you know, happen. But again, some very interesting things about, you know, temporary access, being able to go back on the story. I definitely think those are some very good ideas. I definitely recommend to go check out his video. I'll leave a link in the chat below. Go check it out, give it a like, give him a subscribe. Again, if you're watching this on YouTube, then yeah, go give him a subscribe, go give him a like. It'll be down in the link below. And yeah, some really, really good stuff from Saint Tontas there.